what's what. Okay, we're going to go through a paper together and look at how you find quotes for question 2, 3, and 4 of English Language Paper 1 AQA. So for question 2, we're looking at how language is used to describe something. In this case, it's language used to describe the garden. For question 3, we're going to look at how structure is used to interest the reader. That can be from anywhere in the text. And for question 4, we're going to be looking at whether it is surprising that the girl in the garden disappears and whether it's clear that this is Rosie's imagination or not. So I'm going to just show you how I would do this as an English teacher, and hopefully this will help. So the first thing I'm going to be looking for is question 3 stuff. I'm going to be trying to find some question 3 stuff quite aggressively in the first couple paragraphs. Then the bold section, I'm just going to focus on question 2. And then from after that onwards, I'm going to be looking at question 4. Okay, so it was on their first day at the house that Rosie saw the stranger child. So straight away, that's a very interesting focal point. And I think that it definitely adds a sense of interest for the reader straight away, because it's the first day at a new house. And there's this idea of a stranger child, which I'm not quite sure what that means, but this adds mystery for the reader straight away. And this is through a focal point. So this is question 3. Standing at the sink, her hands deep in suds, Rosie was overwhelmed by the tasks that lay ahead of her. That could be another focal point or a focal shift as well, because, it generates pathos, generates pity for Rosie. And again, this is question 3. Tired after the long drive from London the evening before, she gazed vaguely at the sunlit, overgrown garden where Sam and Cara were playing. Now, just as a bonus for you, question 1 was just 4 things we learn about Rosie. And this is how easy that is, people. So it was the first day at the house. That's one thing about Rosie that we learn. Rosie saw a stranger child. That's a second thing. She was standing at the sink. That's a third thing. Or her hands were deep in suds. That would be a fourth thing. But just to show that there's lots more, Rosie was overwhelmed by the tasks ahead of her of the day. That's a 5th thing. She was tired after a long drive from London the evening before. That's a 6th thing, even though you only need 4. She gazed vaguely at the sunlit, overgrown garden where Sam and Cara are playing. So she's watching into the garden where the kids are playing. That's a 7th thing out of 4 things that you need. All right, so that's question 1 done as well. Easy peasy. Okay, so we've got some focal points from the first bit, which could go for question 3. The sash window had old glass that blunted the image, wavering the straightness of fence and washing line, pulling things out of shape. This is an interesting focal point as well, the idea of an old glass window that wavers and bends things out of shape. This adds more mystery. This is also a focal point again, and this is question 3. Sam was kneeling beside the patch of earth that Rosie had cleared for him, making hills and valleys for his matchbox cars and trucks by digging with an old tablespoon. And Cara was toddling from bush to bush with a yellow plastic watering can. So this bit here, we're also, as well as looking at focal points, we're also trying to look for pace. And we're going to look particularly for long sentences or short sentences. So this bit here, this long, complex sentence is very fast pace. And that adds a sense of the excitement and energy of the children in the garden, which could also be quite interesting for the reader. Long sentence, fast pace, excitement of the children in garden. And this is quite endearing, or it kind of like gives us a sense of joy as the reader. So again, this is question 3. I told you I was going to be aggressively finding stuff for question 3, and I am being very aggressive in getting 4 or 5 things. Through the antique glass, Rosie watched them stretch and shrink as they moved, as if she were looking through ripples. She closed her eyes, glad of a moment of calm after the trauma of the last few days. Letting go of the plate she was holding, she spread her tense fingers, allowing the warmth of the water to soothe her. When she opened her eyes, another child was there. Okay, so this final short sentence and short clauses is very much adding to the tension and mystery as well. Short clauses, short sentence, tension, mystery. Okay, that's question 3 as well. So we've got 5 things that we could talk about in terms of question 3 from reading these first 2 paragraphs. We've also answered question 1 completely. Okay, so now we're on to question 2. Rosie had made a quick check of the unfamiliar garden before letting the children go out to play. So we've got the adjective unfamiliar, garden described as mysterious, possibly untrustworthy, unsettling, that sort of thing. So that comes from the adverb, and this is question 2. Before letting the children go out to play, the bottom half of the garden was an overgrown mess. So that's quite interesting imagery of the garden. It describes the garden in quite a negative way. Negative connotations of a garden that is wild and overgrown. A muddle of trees and shrubs. An ancient mulberry tree stood at the center. So the word ancient has connotations of something that's obviously very, very well established. Garden has been there for a very long time, very old. That's the adjective ancient. That's question 2. Well, all of this is going to be question 2 from this section. Oh, I don't know why that didn't. That's annoying. Well, you know what I said anyway. So old, adjective. Its massive twisted branches dropped to the ground in places. Drooped to the ground in places. Its knuckles in the earth like a gigantic malformed hand. So this bit here, you're looking for techniques as well. So I don't know what is going on with my mouse today. Sorry about this, people. It's personification. So it makes the garden, remember the question is how the garden is described. So the garden described as alive, basically, as living, intelligent. It's kind of its own character. But it's also it's a giant garden, and it's quite, in some ways, quite unpleasant, the idea that it's sort of malformed and it's drooping everywhere and stuff like that. The wintry sun hung low in the sky, and the gnarled growth threw long, twisted shadows across the undergrowth within its cage. The trunk of the tree was snarled with the tangled ivy that grew up through the broken bricks and chunks of cement, choking it. So this presents the garden as being at war with itself. The garden is at war. Well, I'm having to press the plus button like 6 times for it to work. The garden at war with itself. It's also very violent imagery as well. The path that led down towards the fence at the bottom, which marked the garden off from an orchard beyond, disappeared into a mass of nettles and brambles before it reached a padlocked door. So the padlocked door, it kind of symbolizes mystery and maybe even sort of a prison, that sort of thing. Mysterious, prison, sinister, intimidating, that sort of thing. Okay, so there you go. That's question 2. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things we could talk about. In the answer, I'd recommend 2 paragraphs, 2 quotes per paragraph. Okay, so we're into the final stretch. Question 4 only now. So question 4, we're going to be looking for, is it surprising that the girl disappears? And is it clear that this is in Rosie's imagination? So a little girl was sitting back on her heels beside a clump of daisies that grew against the fence. She had her back to Rosie and was holding tight to the handle of a large wicker basket that stood on the ground beside her. Cara seemed unfazed by the girl's presence and continued to move, engrossed, along the row of plants. So this bit here, I would say it sort of somewhat agree with the statement, because why doesn't Cara mind the little girl near her? But the reason it's somewhat agree is she just too engrossed, as it says, in her own playing to see the other girl? So I'm not sure whether this proves that it's in Rosie's mind or not, really. I think that it could show it's in Rosie's mind, but it sort of also could show that it's not in Rosie's mind. Rosie bent forward to look through the clearest of the panes and peered closer. So the fact that Rosie peers through the clearest of the panes, she's checking whether the girl is there or not. So if it is imaginary, it is a very vivid hallucination. The idea that she can see it that clearly seems to me to be less likely that it's in her mind, because normally when people hallucinate things, fortunately I haven't really ever experienced this, so I'm not exactly sure, but I don't think that it's normally vividly real like that. Maybe it is, I'm not sure. The child was small, maybe about 8 or 9, although something in the tense hunch of her shoulders made her seem older. So the fact that the girl is described in unusual ways could be more likely that she is unreal, because what little girl is hunched like this? Or it could mean she's real, because why would Rosie hallucinate it like this? So again, it's somewhat agree. Her hair hung down her back in a matted, dusty-looking plait, and she was wearing dressing up shoes, an ankle-length dress, and a pinafore in washed-out greys and tans, like a homemade Cinderella costume. So this whole bit is vivid description, which again makes it, I think, less likely that it's fake. Vivid description, lots of detail, less likely to be a hallucination, I think. Apart from, however, reference to Cinderella, which is a fairy tale, right? So the fact that she looks like a Cinderella thing maybe makes it more likely. So you probably can tell just from the way that I'm going here that, why is this just not changing? So annoying. You can probably tell that I'm going to somewhat agree, right? I've got stuff to agree with, I've got stuff to disagree with. Where on earth had she come from? She must be a neighbour's child, but how had she got in? The wooden fences that separated the gardens between each of the houses in the terrace were high, surely too high for a child to climb. So again, this bit here, the rhetorical question of how had she got in, I think this adds more to the idea that she is imaginary, because it does seem very unlikely that an 8 or 9-year-old girl would manage to break through these very tall fences. The child glanced over her shoulder back towards the houses, a quick, furtive movement, as if she was scanning. As if she was scanning. Sorry about the camera. Scanning the upper windows of the row, afraid of being overlooked. Rosie caught a glimpse of her face, pale and drawn with anxiety, before the girl turned back and reached forward to quickly tuck a piece of trailing white cloth into the basket. Almost unconsciously, Rosie registered that the girl was left-handed like herself. So this bit, it's interesting that the girl is similar to Rosie, makes it more likely she is imaginary. And there was something animal-like in her movements. Oh man, why does it keep doing that? More likely to. So weird. I click comment and it goes away. Anyway, so get rid of that. So quick animal-like movements, darting mouse, flitting sparrow, some small dun creature that moves fast to blend into the background. So again, this seems less likely to be a hallucination, because why would she hallucinate like this? Something wasn't right here. She had distress in those eyes. Rosie turned away, dried her hands, and hurriedly slipped on her flip-flops. She would go gently, raise no challenge about her being in the garden, but say hello and try to find out what was the matter. Maybe she pointed out her mother. That her mother would be worrying where she was. She could persuade the girl to let her take her home. But when she stepped outside, the child was gone. So this final bit, I think, is surprising. She left suddenly, or the Rosie stopped hallucinating. Either way, because it's so abrupt, it is quite surprising. So I think you would agree with that part, that it is quite surprising when the girl disappears, because it's so abrupt and we didn't expect it. But maybe you could make an argument that it's not that surprising, because if you make the argument that she is imaginary, then obviously, it wouldn't be surprising that a hallucination would suddenly go out of your mind, I guess. So that's the way that I would face doing whatever comes up tomorrow in the exam, or tomorrow, assuming you're doing it this year. You want to attack question 3 in the first few paragraphs, then you want to attack question 2 in the extract they give you, and then after question 2, I would go all out attack on question 4 and find what you can to agree or disagree with. Hopefully that was helpful. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them down below. Thank you.